We'll get started here. Good afternoon and welcome to the award ceremony for Digital Directions, our annual exhibition of 2D and 3D work, the image-based work produced through digital software. My name is Emil Petruncio and I'm the exhibition chair for Digital Directions. We have another wonderful show this year. And for my background, I've selected one of the works from the show, Lee Hassig's Contours 5755, because I'm a fan of topographic maps and bathymetric charts. So I like those contours. I want to thank the Circle Gallery staff for unpacking this show, and David Diaz, Sharon Arsenal, Kate Stillwell, Nicole Levy, and Chris Fowler for hanging the works. It's my pleasure to introduce our juror for this exhibition, Associate Professor Jeff Murphy. Jeff is a Charlotte-based artist working primarily with digital media, and his creative career began while taking photography, film, and animation courses as an undergrad at Ohio State University. Jeff's work has been published in a diverse array of publications, including Wired Magazine, World Art Magazine, and the textbook Exploring Color Photography. He's received individual artist grants from the Arts and Science Council, the Ohio Arts Council, and the North Carolina Arts Council. In addition to over 40 national solo exhibitions, his digital images, videos, and installations have been seen in the US, Germany, Hungary, Spain, and Brazil. And one of Jeff's videos was an award winner in last year's Digital Directions exhibition. Jeff's currently an associate professor of art at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, where he teaches digital imaging, interactive design, and photography, and video and animation. It's a lot of preps, Jeff. He received his BFA from Ohio State University in 1989 and his MFA from the University of Florida in 1995. And you can see his work at murphydigitalart.com. So Jeff, thank you for curating a great show, and I'll turn it over to you for your juror statement and the awards.
Thank you, Emil.
Yeah.
Thanks to everybody at MFA for letting me juror this work. It was great. This was a great experience always to see what's happening in the field. So thank you all. Okay, so I guess I'll read this. I'm not the best writer in the world, and there was such a range of work to look at. It's always a very challenging task to select the works and pick the awards because there's so much nuance. And I've been teaching a long time, so I'm used to having conversations about the work with my students and other artists to understand a little bit better about their fundamental thinking and where it's happening. So the juror statement is sort of just a broad overview. I became a digital artist because of my fascination with the dynamic and constantly evolving elements of expression in the medium. Therefore, it was a great opportunity to review this work in Digital Directions, as the submissions included a wide spectrum of work, exploring a multitude of themes and illustrating a very expansive and varied use of technology. When selecting the works for Digital Directions, I was searching for the endless possibilities that technology can bring to the world of art and how it can transform the way we experience and understand art. Technology allows for new and exciting visual mutations I have a spelling error there, on the historical past. Sorry about that. You'd think now a spell check would have picked the O up. I found myself gravitating to work that utilized some traditional means of creative expression, but also exploited digital tools in a way that expanded on the meaning of the work. When I found myself asking questions and trying to solve a visual puzzle, I figured the artist was onto something. The richer work seemed to set the stage for a wide range of meaning and possible interpretations, and that allowed the work to resonate at a higher frequency. So there it is. That's essentially what I was looking for. Works that sort of set the stage for a broader dialogue, a possibility of different scenes, that sort of thing. So different threads of meaning.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. And our first award winner, honorable mention, is Judy Gunther for Around the Bend.
And I should say this was all blind process. So this is the first time I've seen anyone's name, except for I got a preview of this earlier, but only till today. So I just wanted to mention, if the artists want to jump in, if they are here and want to jump in with some commentary, you're so welcome to do that.
And Judy is with us. Yeah.
Okay, great, Judy. So first of all, this was sort of an outlier a little bit in the sense that, I mentioned different threads of meaning, and I tend to actually, probably you'll notice there's a lot of sort of collage type works and very dense works, but this one was like super direct. There's so much motion involved with it. it seems to like celebrate speed with its use of the repetitive lines and the blur. And it also seems to even celebrate speed going down a very narrow tunnel. If I've always been like a mountain biker, trail runner. Now I have an electric skateboard. When you're on a narrow thing, a narrow pathway, speed is just amplified that much more. And this whole piece just sort of amplifies that. So it's almost whimsical and fun and very direct. It's like just a pure expression of that kind of speed.
Thank you. What I would say is that it put a motion blur on this passage. Happens to be at the top of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai.
Oh yeah.
There's one little place that you can walk out and kind of see the outside of it, and these rows of stories that are above you. And it was very unusual and had these spiky things that were coming out the sides. But it was kind of a narrow passageway, but with the addition of the motion blur, I felt the need of speed there too. So that's kind of what I was going for.
Both quoting Top Gun.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay, and next up is Terry Pelmar's work, Lost in the Forest.
This one I was fascinated by the forms, and there's some repetition in this. The idea of like fractals and repeating elements in nature was very interesting. And also like these structures, they were trees in a forest. You get that from the title. There's a big hint there, but it also feels like a stack of clarinets on one level. There were a lot of things happening in this one that I found fascinating. I also, when I wonder about the technology and how things were created, that's actually a huge plus. As I mentioned in my viewer statement, I had a long time ago when I was a student at Ohio State, I had a professor that said, I always like work when I think I should have thought of that. And I still have that response sometimes, like if I can't figure out how something was done, or I see something that was done with tools that I use a lot, but never really quite made that. And I think, I wish I would have done that. I mean, that's always a huge plus too. So this forest of trees sort of obscures these spheres with these vines coming from them, and they're all sort of intertwined. They're almost like sentries behind this forest of spheres, or in front of this forest of spheres. So there's a different relationship between these foreground and background elements that, to me, set a stage for like a broader folk tale to happen within this realm. So I found it pretty fascinating.
This was done with fractal programs. The one that I really enjoy using right now is Mandelwolf 3D.
Okay.
And you're given the option of dozens of equations that you combine in any number of ways and tweak in any number of ways. And so it projects the 3D space graphically on your screen, and you can explore that space. And so as I explored, I saw something that resembled trees, and I started tweaking the equations until I got an image that really spoke to me. And there were these orbs in the background that I have another image that focuses on the orbs. And then I color it and texture it in Photoshop. And the result is something like this.
It's super fascinating. What was the name of the program again that you used?
Mandelwolf 3D.
Mandelwolf 3D.
It's a free program. You can download it. It has no instruction manual, so it's kind of challenging to figure out how to get there. But once you do, it's very rewarding.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Terry.
Okay, and next honorable mention is Larry Franson's kinetic sculpture, Let's Roll. I don't think Larry's with us today.
So this one was also a little bit of an outlier. I think I'm just completely fascinated by this real whimsical nature of these things. Like, I've seen works like this before, but I appreciate that whimsical nature of them, where, it's like setting up a row of dominoes or playing Jenga and waiting for the thing to teeter and fall. It's like there's this anticipation of the pathway and the things that are going to happen. And, I think there's a bit of a like childlike fascination with things like that. I didn't see tons of threads of meaning in the thing, but it spoke to my childhood self, I guess. And that is why it ended up with an honorable mention. Also, I was
Yeah,
just
and it is fun.
kind of putting together these intricate levels of pieces. Like I have a deep appreciation for that as well.
It is fun to watch. You do feel like a kid again. Our final honorable mention is Susan Moore for a Disjointed Travel Log 313.
So this was part of a series. I travel a lot. I was just telling Emil I'm going to be going to Sardinia for the artist residency later this semester. And, you know, my background, as you all saw, was in photography and video and animation from Ohio State way back in the day. And so I continue to shoot a lot of pictures and generate a lot of my information or visuals with lens-based things. And so partly, I probably responded to the whole idea of travel and this idea of a travel log, but I also responded to, you know, the fact that it's fractured a little bit and there's elements that are blurred and diffuse, and it reminds me of memory. You know, we keep a travel log because we're trying to, you know, recollect on the things we did, very retrospective of our memories from travel. And when you're trying to piece those things together, they're often blurry and unfocused, which is why we take the photographs to begin with, in part. But it can't explain the whole situation around us. A photograph can't do all those things. So this sort of series, in general, sort of explained all that stuff we get from traveling and that experience of traveling abroad, and how our memories are a little bit disjointed and over the years especially become fuzzy. So I really appreciated that with this work.
Right. And I don't see Susan with us today, but all of our Jurors' Choice Award recipients are. And so we'll move on to those. The first Jurors' Choice Award is to Bruce Wood for Freak Show.
I love this from the second I saw it, just because this one, many of the other ones, has that sets the stage thing that I often look for and has so many implications and a broad set of ideas. There's so many elements to it that it becomes super complex. I mean, primarily you have this camel figure holding up this man and like in the jar as a specimen. But then there's all this other stuff happening in the background. So there's so many layers of sort of visual fascination that I found with this. And I think I mentioned this in my statement, but a lot of the works that I ended up giving awards to are the ones that, you know, after I put everything away, you know, looked at all the work and then came back and looked at it again and again. And then I stepped aside for a while, and the ones that I was still thinking of are generally the ones I gave awards to, because those are the ones that were like puzzles or had so much happening in them that my fascination. So yeah, that's what I appreciated here. The stage for so much meaning to happen. And its quirkiness.
Well, thank you very much. That was my underlying theme is kind of quirky. And typically I'm a 3D artist, but when pandemic hit and I was hunkering down at home, I started doing the digital imagery and collected all the photographs and images that I've had over the years, and started using Photoshop to layer image upon image upon image. And that man in the bottle is actually me.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, that's me. But from exactly what you said, I like to kind of draw the viewer in to tell a story or create a story. And the story is not mine. The story is that of the viewer. And if I can draw somebody in and help them see something maybe a little bit different or get an emotion out of them, that's what I'm trying to do. And so I use all types of imagery, and I'll do some quirky things with different things, like the little kid in the overalls. That's a mirror image of two fish heads with a mouth on it, just to kind of change things up and create them a little bit differently. I have a lot of fun doing these. If it makes me smile and makes me like it, then I think I'm successful.
Thank you, Bruce. It reminds me that one of my favorite artists of all time has always been Hieronymus Bosch.
Yes.
You know, it has with some of the figures you have in the background remind me of some of that work in a more contemporary way.
Yeah.
Which again is one of those things I was looking for with all this work, is how people looked at things that might have happened historically, but have applied a new lens of technology onto them and sort of molded them in a more contemporary way.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. Are there any 3D elements? You mentioned you did 3D work before you started doing this kind of work.
Not in this piece in particular.
Okay.
I have taken, some of my 3D work that I photographed and clipped that out and put it into some of the series of images that I did. I made well over 150 images during the pandemic just to keep my sanity or my insanity intact. And every one of them, is just a real treat to make.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce. And next up is John Allen, 210206 034651.
I laugh at the title because it's so long and hard to remember, impossible to remember. I was just calling it 21 in my head. And it actually, the title of when I first heard it, I was telling Emildis that it reminded me of math a lot. And then I started having these, like I have a 14-year-old that I have to try to help him with his math homework, which is super hard now because I don't remember math at all. I was told there would be no math. And but then I like everything else as part of this collage kind of thing between the fossils and the sort of references to technology and the sort of design attributes that it has with the lines and how the numbers are. And there's a lot of things that these numbers could stand for. I assumed, because of probably my background with video editing, that they're time codes with something that's obviously at least 60 frames a second, but they could be so many other things. And that sort of range of possibility and how they all flowed in this atmospheric space and sort of the muted color all made this a super powerful work for me. There were other ones from John that also I found very appealing because of the sense of collage and all the threads of meaning that they offered. Is John here? Hi, John.
Hey, well, first of all, thank you very much. I was wondering if this was the piece that was selected, actually. Your guesswork about the timestamp is exactly right. This is, the title has to do with the exact moment that the piece was finished, from the year down to the very last second. A lot of my work has to do with the temporal, especially kind of the deep past and distant future. So this piece was a way of kind of bridging those two. The trilobite is from the Smithsonian Open Access Archive. I'm a volunteer there, so I find like being in the fossil hall, kind of having that encounter with deep time is something that's very enriching, and it kind of provides a very interesting context for our world. So that was kind of a way to acknowledge that. The other elements are from various photographs I've taken over the years. My background is in architecture, so it's kind of an acknowledgement of that as well, and kind of the phenomenological aspect of the built environment. So it's kind of that through line from the deep past to the distant future, acknowledging the natural world and the built environment. And like you were saying, there is that technological aspect as well, that kind of bridges that. So this was kind of a beginning of a whole series of works I did throughout the pandemic that were very specifically focused on that, specifically focused on time. All of this was made in Photoshop, like the vast majority of my digital work is. So again, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Oh, no problem, man. I would love to have access to that fossil collection. That sounds like a great thing. Just having always had an interest in, if you looked at any of my work, there's lots of bones and fossils and that sort of thing too, mostly bones. Always had a deep fascination with field museums and so I'm sure that drew me in as well, but I did appreciate your connection between, this long range of time, evolutionary time to this technological age. That's a lot of time space to cover.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
All right. And next Juror's Choice Award goes to Mike Rainey for Lesson of Angles.
There were a few works from Michael that I really appreciated. And this one in particular just had so much happening in terms of the potential narratives that it might describe. There's like a reference to past events through the small little pictures that are made to look like Polaroids, or maybe were Polaroids of these places that look like they could have been a war zone, but maybe that's partly because there's this giant bomber dropping bombs over them, but mostly this idea that they're like these historical photographic bombs dropping from the plane. I just found fascinating, just that basic metaphor for our own personal histories I'm sure it's a lot more dense than that. And it's, it's layered with this typography and text where you can partially read it, but it's very dense. So there's overlapping threads of thought in the writing. And then the images are intertwined in all of that. So it becomes more complex, but in a good way because of its ability to like reach a broader audience. So it might be grounded in a very personal experience, but I think viewers can reach into that and pull out elements that they can identify with and relate to. So if Michael's here, I would love to hear if those photographs are personal history or how that all works.
Well, I think you interpreted that very well. Thank you, first of all, and thank you to Emil and all the staff and everybody else who submitted work also. And I have problems with my voice, so if you can't hear me, you have to tell me to speak up.
I can hear you.
There's both a personal history and an interest in and cultural phenomena, historical things that kind of affected the way I might be thinking about things, or I look back on those as something that for whatever reason I was fascinated with at one point in time, and I'm still trying to deal with it, etc. I started making made to be photographed sculptures out of other photographs many years ago. Eventually, those became, through several steps, through some Van Dyke prints and Iris prints back in the day, eventually they became these digital Photoshop pieces. And the way that I kind of ended up working this way is very odd. The logistical part of it like made sense to me because I was used to making these sculptures in three-dimensional space and rephotographing them. But there was a period of a number of years where I had sold all my camera equipment to put food on the table and things like that. And so my daughter had a little cheap Instamatic, and we took pictures of our life and things happening around us. And a number of years later, when I was making work again, I had this big blank spot of work when I wasn't doing any work. So I went back and I got all those cheap little snapshots from that time, that era, and started making these out of them. And I started just putting words in because, of course, you learn in modernist photography that to be narrative is the greatest sin. So I just couldn't resist right away, There are 3 or 4 stories going on simultaneously, overlayered with each other. And there's a couple of visual jokes like the photo bombs. Bombs become photo bombs. And I didn't really mean that at first. And I realized it afterwards. These are essentially and always have been what I call machines for understanding. They are trying to rearrange elements that were either personal or had to do with my family's experience or something like that. Rearrange elements, rearrange thoughts, relook at times, relook at moments, relook at thoughts that I wrote down, spread them all out again, and try to say, like, does that help me understand things better now? And I can't say that it helps me truly understand it better, but I find it a very satisfying way to work. The last part I'll add on this, because I can be very long-winded, I can talk for another hour, but I won't, is I stopped making work in 2003. I did not make work for 17 years. Or I made work, but I never finished things, put it that way. I never made any decisions. I made lots of photographs, but I didn't make any decisions that would say, okay, this is finished for 17 years. And I started again in 2020, not because of the pandemic, but for some other reasons. And these started happening shortly thereafter again. And it is both formally and conceptually, pretty much a straight line from where I left off. In between, I'm not sure why I didn't feel compelled to make things, but I was satisfied not to make things during that time. And then around 2020, maybe it's with advancing age, you think, oh, I better get with it finally again. So anyway, thank you for your thoughts on this. I appreciate them.
Sure, Michael. I love hearing that stories. And so I mean, it's kind of like your daughter took some of those pictures, some of the.
Not these in particular, but I used to use some of hers or ones I took with her very bad, kind of out of focus camera type things from that time. I used to use some of those. The little snapshots down in the bottom are in fact from my stepfather took in the 40s. And the story on the bottom right hand side, the text, it doesn't explain the pictures at all. Like the text never explains the pictures do not illustrate the text. Rather, they each contribute to kind of a new meaning. The title comes from part of that story in there about one of those pictures is referred to as standing in a particular angle, trying to hold a pose, which is in the story called exhausting. And that way, kind of like trying to hold what we know the world to be, or what we think the world is, can be exhausting. And that's where that.
I did really appreciate the fact that I could get ideas from the text, but it didn't try to explain anything to me. So in a very concrete way, it let me still immerse my own, bring my own narrative to the work. And it gave me a structure, but it wasn't didactic about telling me what to think. So I appreciate that with text and work. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And our final Juror's Choice Award goes to Sally Canzaneri for 1800 M Street Northwest.
So this was part of a larger group of work that I really thought was fascinating because it took something, I mean, I assume it started with digital photographs or some sort of photographs, most of those are digital anymore, but then it packaged them in this not only three-dimensional shape, but also in this idea of a book. So there's two other worlds of thought in there. So I was just really fascinated about how that all blended together to make this sculptural object that was about a space, but this, the space in this form is abstract enough that I think viewers could bring their own sense of where it is and what it's about. We all have our own experiences with different locations, bring our own sort of emotions and sensibilities to it as well. It really gives it power. So I really appreciated all those things working together to really pull me into this book. Sally, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Yes. Well, thank you to everyone for the show, first of all, and all the work. And then thank you, Jeff, for selecting the piece and saying such nice things about it. Yeah, it does, as you say, it starts with digital photographs of this particular building that's interesting because it's very reflective, but it has a concave front. And then catty corner from it is another building or other buildings that are much of a different era because it's near DuPont Circle. But so you have this very modern building and some 18th century-ish buildings across from it. But then, yeah, the book part is part of it. So it starts with digital photographs and then actually I do most of the work in Lightroom with them. But anyhow, and it does start with a traditional artist book form, of course, which is much loved by artist books, which is a accordion book. But I got intrigued with playing. I've done some other pieces that are lenticulars that slice photographs together so that you see one from one side and one from the other side of folded paper. And this particular form that I have done in several books in kind of evolved from playing around with those. So it's an 8-panel accordion, then a 16-panel accordion, and then a 32-panel accordion layered over, and then the outside ones cut down so you can see in the back. But partly, I guess, I've done a lot of photography on the built environment, particularly DC, but of other cities. But I was trying to look at ways to get, when you're doing photographs of architecture, part of the problem is conveying the whole experience of the building. Because when you photograph a building, you can't really photograph the sounds and the smell and all. And so I've been playing with more abstract ways to get the building, to try to get some sense more of the spirit of the building. I think as you say, and the other piece that I had in the show is a different form, but again, this same kind of idea of trying to capture somehow the experience in a not explicitly figurative way. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah, it does. And I also mentioned, I forgot to mention, I really appreciate the craft element of this work and how so the way it's put together is pretty amazing. So I appreciate that element as well.
That was also a lot of the fun of doing it. I mean, I had done artist books and then went into doing flat photography more, and then went back into doing sculpture artist books. And a lot of the fun of working it out also is just working out the structure and figuring out how to make the structure work. Yeah. So the kind of just the craft element, it's easy to get very entranced by, I think. Entranced by creating, I meant. I mean, they've been fun to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely still like to find ways to enjoy the process. And this, I can sort of just feel that the paper sucking me in and wanting to manipulate it. So
yeah, I really do love paper. And so, I mean, the digital serves the paper, and that's how I got into doing digital photography. But yeah, I really like the concrete feel of the paper. Yeah. So. Yeah,
this where I probably defined, I think, there was a statement listed with this digital directions and about the work and how wanted to see work that, utilize technology in a new way. And this was just a really nice marriage of like, bookmaking, which has kind of a long tradition, and then the use of like digital imagery, digital photographs to put it all together. So it seemed like a very great way to combine the two.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sally. Do we have a little time here? Do any other artists have questions for Jeff or comments on their work? And thanks, Julie, for running those slides. I hope you can get down to the gallery if you haven't been. For those of you in the Mid-Atlantic area, the show will have a reception, an in-person reception on Saturday, the 25th of February from 4 to 6 p.m. But it's a really nice show to see. We've got some wonderful animations there, two animations. Dolphin Brown's here with us. One of her beautiful animations is in the show, and it's a very well organized, arranged exhibition. So very proud of it. And the Circle Gallery is a great venue. So congrats to all the award winners and to everyone who's had work accepted into this show. Thanks, Jeff, again for selecting a really fine show. And we have Stephen Carpenter, I think wants to say something here.
I was an hour late, actually. I was ready to look at this at 5, but I just wanted to say thank you for including me in. This has been quite the whole digital experience for me has been quite a journey. And because I come from a rather traditional pre-computer fine arts, art history background, I tend to look at things in a strange way, I guess. But I was very pleased to be included and to know that at least my particular path is maybe possibly something that I need to pursue. And so thank you very much. Thank you, Jeff. I'm glad to see you. And thank you for including me in. So with that, I'll just unmute. I'll mute again.
You're very welcome. And I appreciate all the comments from everyone. I would love to hear from the artists themselves about the work. It's, it's those conversations that I find to be really rewarding and really helps the work come to a new level of understanding for me. As creators, we work with an audience, and having a dialogue is a wonderful thing. So thank you all for your comments, contributions.
And Stephen, as an oceanographer, I like that your etude in red and blue ocean arc had a special appeal to me. So glad you could join us. Better late than never.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your Sunday. And see some comments in the chats. Oh, very nice. Congrats to all and thank yous for going around. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you.